The sun blazed over a land untouched by cities, roads, or machines. Thick forests stretched endlessly, hiding creatures that would one day change the world. But this was not the age of humans, not yet. This was a time when our ancestors were just another animal fighting to survive. A strange, small creature with sharp eyes and clever hands scurried up a tree, unaware that its descendants would one day rule the planet. The air was thick with the calls of unknown birds. Giant beasts roamed the land, tall, hairy creatures with tusks, not elephants, but something older. Rivers cut through dense jungles where shadows moved in ways that sent chills down the spine. This was Earth 5.7 million years ago, a place of danger and opportunity. In the treetops, a group of small primates watched the world below. They were not monkeys, not yet apes, but something in between. Their fingers gripped branches tightly as they searched for fruit, insects, anything to fill their hungry bellies. One wrong move meant a deadly fall. One missed warning meant becoming a predator's meal. Then, a rustle in the leaves. Every head turned. A snake? A leopard? No, just the wind. But the fear was real. Survival here was a game of luck and instinct. And for these creatures, the game had only just begun. The rains had not come for months. The once lush forests grew quieter, the leaves brittle under the scorching sun. Waterholes shrank into muddy puddles, and the smell of dry earth hung heavy in the air. The primates in the treetops felt the change. Their usual meals of ripe fruit and juicy insects were disappearing. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and desperation set in. One morning, a young male, small but bold, ventured lower than usual, his sharp eyes scanning the ground. The others watched nervously. The forest floor was a death trap. Big cats with dagger-like teeth prowled in the shadows. Snakes as thick as branches lay coiled in the undergrowth. But hunger was a stronger fear than predators. Then, a scent caught his attention, something sweet, rotting. Fallen fruit, half buried in the dirt. His stomach growled. He hesitated, glancing back at the safety of the trees. A rustle in the bushes froze him. Was it the wind? Or something worse? A sudden screech tore through the silence. One of his kin, a female, had been too slow. A flash of spotted fur, a hunting cat, dragged her into the tall grass before anyone could react. The message was clear. The ground was deadly. But so was starvation. Days passed. More of them risked descending, moving in quick, nervous bursts. They learned to grab what they could and flee before predators noticed. Some didn't make it back. But those who did brought back more than food. They brought a dangerous idea. What if they didn't just visit the ground, but lived on it? The dry season stretched on, relentless. The trees that once provided safety and food now stood like skeletons, their branches offering little shelter. The primates had no choice. They had to adapt or die. The boldest among them began spending more time on the ground, their bodies learning new ways to move. At first, they scrambled on all fours, their knuckles scraping against the rough earth. But something strange began happening. When they needed to carry food, a precious handful of nuts or a chunk of rotting meat, they would rise awkwardly onto two legs, balancing for just a few seconds before dropping back down. It was clumsy, inefficient, but it worked. Then came the twist. One evening, as the group foraged near a dried-up riverbed, a new sound cut through the air, not the growl of a predator, but something deeper, more rhythmic. Thuds, shaking earth. The primates froze, their instincts screaming danger. Over the ridge emerged creatures unlike anything they had seen before. Massive, thick-skinned beasts with curved tusks, distant relatives of elephants, but built like walking boulders. They moved in a slow, unstoppable line, tearing up what little vegetation remained. The primates scattered, but one young male, too slow, found himself trapped between the giants. A tusk grazed his side, sending him tumbling into the dirt. Pain shot through his body. He should have died then. But as he lay there, trembling, he realized something astonishing. The giants hadn't even noticed him. To them, he was nothing. Insignificant. That moment changed everything. The ground was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of opportunities. If they could learn to move differently, to see the world from a new perspective, maybe they could survive in ways they'd never imagined. But survival wasn't the only thing at stake. Because far away, hidden in the shadows of the dying forest, another pair of eyes watched. calculating, waiting. The injured primate limped back to his group, his side throbbing where the giant's tusk had grazed him. The others huddled around, sniffing at his wound with nervous curiosity. They had all seen the massive beasts, the way they moved without fear, as if they owned the earth itself. It made the primates feel small, insignificant, but the young male's close call had sparked something new in their minds. That night, as the moon cast long shadows through the skeletal trees, the primates slept fitfully. Their dreams were filled with tusks and thunderous footsteps. But one sound woke them, not the growl of a predator, but something far more unsettling. Laughter. Not human laughter, of course, but the chittering, mocking calls of other primates. Close. Too close. The group tensed, their eyes scanning the darkness. Then they saw them, figures moving through the trees. Not their own kind, but similar. Larger. Stronger. Their fur was darker, their eyes sharper. These strangers moved with a confidence that sent chills through the first group. They had clearly been living on the ground longer. They knew its secrets. One of the strangers dropped from a low branch, landing effortlessly on 2 feet. It was clearly a male, held something in his hand. A rock. Not just picked up, but chosen. Shaped. The message was clear: we are not like you. The injured young male of the first group bristled. He had just begun to understand the ground, and now these interlopers were claiming it as their own. He let out a warning screech. The stranger with the rock tilted his head, as if amused. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he hurled the stone. It missed, barely, but the meaning was unmistakable. This is our land now. The first group had a choice: fight for what little remained, or flee deeper into the unknown. Neither option promised survival. But as they hesitated, the wind shifted. A new scent filled the air: smoke. Something was burning. The scent of smoke thickened in the air, carrying with it something primal, a terror older than time itself. The primates' nostrils flared, their eyes widening as the first tendrils of gray curled above the tree-line. The rival group froze mid-threat, their aggressive postures forgotten. For the first time, both tribes shared the same thought: run. The fire moved like a living thing, swallowing dry brush with terrifying speed. Embers rained down, igniting patches of grass where they landed. The ground-dwelling primates, the stronger, more advanced group, scattered first, their muscular legs carrying them toward the riverbed they had claimed as their territory. The tree-dwellers hesitated, torn between the devil they knew and the one they didn't. Then the wind shifted. A wall of flames cut off the path to the trees. There was no going back, only forward, into the unknown. The young male who had survived the tusk glanced at his kin, then did something no primate in his group had ever done before. He led. With a series of sharp cries, he guided them not away from the rival group, but parallel to them, toward a rocky outcrop barely visible through the smoke. The others followed, their instincts warring between trust and terror. The rocks were unfamiliar ground, but the fire respected no territory. It would kill them all equally. As they clambered onto the heated stone, coughing and trembling, the impossible happened. The two groups, enemies moments before, found themselves huddled side by side, watching as the world burned around them. The rival leader still clutched his shaped rock, but his threats had turned to whimpers. The fire didn't care who was stronger. Nature was the great equalizer. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the fire changed direction. A shift in the wind sent the flames racing eastward, leaving behind a smoldering corridor of destruction. And there, in the ashes, something glinted. Water. Not the dwindling river the rivals had claimed, but a hidden spring, exposed by the fire's hunger. Fresh, untouched, the answer to their survival. But the revelation came with a price. From the smoke emerged shapes, not primates, not predators, but something in between. Taller, silent, watching. They had been here all along. The water shimmered in the fire-scorched earth, its surface broken only by the occasional falling ember. Both groups of primates stared at it, then at each other, then at the strange figures standing motionless at the tree line. These new creatures were unlike anything they had seen before. Taller than the primates, but not as massive as the tusked giants. Their bodies lean and covered in coarse, striped fur. Their eyes glowed faintly in the smoky haze, unblinking. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one of the striped creatures took a single step forward. Its movements were deliberate, almost graceful, as if it were testing the air. The primates tensed, their muscles coiled for flight. But the creature didn't attack. Instead, it tilted its head and made a sound. Low, guttural, but unmistakably deliberate. A call. The young male from the first group felt something stir in his chest. This wasn't the mindless growl of a predator or the panicked screech of prey. It was something else. Something new. The rival leader, still gripping his rock, let out a warning hiss. He wasn't ready to trust. Not after the fire. Not after everything. But the striped creature ignored him, its gaze locked onto the water. Then, without breaking eye contact, it crouched and dipped its paw into the spring. A ripple spread across the surface. Nothing happened. The creature withdrew its paw, shook off the water, and then, slowly, deliberately, turned and vanished back into the scorched trees. The others followed, melting into the shadows as if they had never been there at all. Silence fell. The primates looked at one another, then at the water. It was still there, still fresh, still safe. Or was it? The rival leader snarled and shoved his way forward, his followers close behind. They drank greedily, their thirst overpowering their caution. The first group hesitated, watching, waiting. Then the ground trembled. Not from fire, not from giants, from something beneath their feet. The trembling grew stronger. Small pebbles danced across the ground as the primates scrambled back from the spring, their instincts screaming danger. The rival leader dropped his rock, his arrogance replaced by raw panic. The water that had promised salvation now seemed to pulse with something unnatural. Bubbles broke the surface, not from heat, but from something far more terrifying. Then the ground split open. A gash tore through the earth with a sound like thunder, swallowing the nearest of the rival group whole. The others shrieked, stumbling back as the spring drained into the widening fissure. The striped creatures had known. They had warned them. The young male from the first group acted without thinking. He grabbed the nearest of his kin and shoved them toward the rocky outcrop, away from the collapsing earth. His action sparked movement in the others, both his own group and the rivals, as survival instinct overcame rivalry. For the first time, they moved as one, fleeing the crumbling ground. But the earth wasn't done with them yet. From the fissure rose a stench so foul it made their eyes water. Then came the scraping, clicking, a sound like bones dragging against stone. Whatever lived beneath the spring, it was awake now. And it was hungry. A clawed limb, slick with mud and something darker, hooked over the edge of the fissure. Then another. The creature pulled itself up slowly, deliberately, as if savoring their terror. Its body was segmented, armored, its many legs ending in hooked barbs. Its eyes, too many eyes, reflected the fading firelight as it turned its head toward the fleeing primates. This was no predator they could outrun or outsmart. This was something ancient, something that had slept beneath their feet for generations. And they had woken it. The armored horror moved with unnatural precision, its many legs carrying it forward in jerking, calculated steps. But strangely, it didn't attack. Not immediately. Instead, it circled the terrified primates, herding them toward the scorched remains of the forest like a living wall of claws and chitin. The message was clear: you will go this way. The young male who had led his group this far felt a new kind of fear twist in his gut. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was something older, something written into the bones of the world itself. The earth had opened up not to swallow them, but to guide them. Then came the scent. Sweet, rotten, familiar. The smell of the fruit that had first lured them to the ground months ago. But now it was stronger, overwhelming, drifting from the blackened trees ahead. The creature behind them clicked its mandibles, driving them forward. The rival leader, still clutching his shaped rock, hesitated. His eyes darted between the monster at their backs and the burned forest ahead. Then, with a snarl, he did the unexpected. He charged the armored horror, rock raised high. The creature didn't even flinch. One barbed leg lashed out, faster than sight. The rival leader's body hit the ground before his scream did. The rock rolled from his limp fingers, coming to rest at the young male's feet. A choice: take it and fight, or leave it and follow the scent. As the young male stared at the rock, something glittered in the ashes nearby. Dozens of them. Stones, bones, twigs, all shaped, all left behind. This wasn't the first time this had happened. They were being led somewhere for a reason. and whatever waited ahead was worse than the creature behind them. The scent of rotting fruit grew thicker as the surviving primates stumbled forward, driven by the clicking horror at their backs. The burnt forest gave way to a clearing they had never seen before, a circular space where the fire had mysteriously died, leaving behind a grotesque garden of twisted vines and hanging pods that pulsed like living things. And the bones. So many bones. They littered the ground in heaps, some fresh with scraps of flesh still clinging to them, others bleached white by time. Primate skulls stared emptily from the dirt, their jaws frozen in final screams. The young males group huddled together, their breath coming in ragged gasps. This was no hunting ground. This was a larder. Then the pods began to split open. Thick, glistening tendrils uncurled from within, dripping with the same sweet scent that had lured them here. The vines moved with purpose, slithering toward the terrified primates like serpents. The clicking creature behind them made a sound almost like satisfaction as it backed away, its job done. The rival group's surviving members broke first, bolting in blind panic, straight into the waiting vines. The tendrils wrapped around limbs, tightening with terrifying speed. One male managed to grab the shaped rock his leader had dropped, swinging wildly. It did nothing. The vines simply absorbed the blow and pulled harder. The young males group didn't run. They couldn't. Every instinct screamed at them to flee, but something deeper held them in place. The awful understanding that this was how their world worked. The plants, the armored horrors, even the striped watchers, they were all part of a cycle older than memory. Then came the worst realization of all. The vines weren't killing their prey. They were preserving them. Alive. For later. The vines tightened around the struggling primates, their sticky secretions hardening into a thick, amber-like substance that slowed movement but didn't suffocate. The young male watched in horror as his rivals were cocooned alive, their terrified eyes still visible through the translucent resin. This wasn't just death, it was storage. Then the striped creatures reappeared. They emerged from the scorched tree line silently, their strange eyes reflecting the dim light filtering through the vine canopy. But they didn't attack. Instead, they moved with deliberate purpose toward the oldest, most weathered pods at the grove's edge. One striped watcher raised its clawed forelimb and made a precise incision along a fossilized pod. Thick, fermented liquid oozed out, the same scent as the fruit that had lured them here, but stronger, aged. The watcher lapped at it carefully, then stepped back. An offering, not to the primates, to the grove itself. The vines nearest the cut pod quivered in response, retracting slightly from the striped creatures as if recognizing them. The young male's mind raced. This wasn't just predation, it was a relationship. The watchers fed the grove, and in return, the grove, what? Spared them? Used them? A new sound cut through the heavy air, a deep, rhythmic vibration coming from the earth. The remaining primates felt it in their bones before they heard it properly. The armored horror that had herded them here clicked in response, retreating into the fissure it had emerged from as if summoned. Then the largest pod at the grove's center split open, not with a tearing sound, but with a sigh. What unfurled from within wasn't a vine, or a plant, or anything recognizable. It was a mass of pulsating tendrils wrapped around something smooth and oval, a seed pod the size of a boulder, its surface etched with patterns that seemed to shift when stared at too long. The striped watchers fell to their knees, if they could be called knees, in unison, pressing their foreheads to the dirt. The young male finally understood. This wasn't just a trap. It was a harvest. And they were the crop. The massive seed pod pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat made visible. The air around it shimmered with a strange heat, distorting the shapes of the kneeling watchers as they chittered in reverence. The young male primate felt his muscles lock, not from fear, but from something deeper. Some ancient instinct recognizing a power older than trees, older than time itself. Then the vines moved again, not toward the living, but toward the oldest cocoons, the ones hanging like grotesque fruit for seasons untold. The tendrils pierced the resin shells with surgical precision, injecting a thick, iridescent fluid into the preserved bodies within. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the cocoons twitched. The young male's breath caught as the nearest pod split open, revealing one of the rival primates, but not as he had been. His fur had taken on a strange, metallic sheen. His fingers had elongated into jointed appendages, the nails hardened into black claws. And his eyes were no longer his own. They mirrored the shifting patterns of the seed pod. The transformed primate stepped forward mechanically, his movements jerky like a puppet learning its strings. He stopped before the young male's group, head tilting at an unnatural angle. When he opened his mouth, the sound that emerged wasn't a scream or a growl. It was perfect mimicry of the young male's own warning call from days before. The watchers stirred excitedly. This was what they had been waiting for. A new sound cut through the grove, a high-pitched keening from the seed pod. In response, the transformed primate suddenly seized the nearest of his former kin, dragging him toward the pulsating core. The young male finally understood with dawning horror. The grove didn't just consume. It recruited, and it was starting with the strongest. The transformed primate dragged his struggling kin toward the pulsating seed pod, its rhythmic glow intensifying as they neared. The young male watched in horror as the victim's fur began standing on end, reacting to some invisible energy radiating from the grove's heart. Then something unexpected happened. The shaped rock, the one the rival leader had dropped earlier, suddenly skittered across the ground as if pulled by an unseen force. It came to rest directly beneath the seed pod, vibrating violently. The transformed primate froze mid-step, his head snapping toward it with unnatural speed. For the first time, the seed pod's rhythm faltered. The young male didn't understand why, but he understood opportunity. With a desperate lunge, he grabbed the nearest vine and bit down hard. The taste was electric, burning his mouth like unripe fruit, but the vine recoiled as if in genuine pain. Chaos erupted. The watchers shrieked, scrambling backward. The armored horror emerged again from its fissure but hesitated, its many legs twitching uncertainly. The transformed primate dropped his captive, clutching at his own head as the patterns in his eyes stuttered like disturbed water. The seed pod's glow became erratic, flashing between colors never before seen in nature. The grove itself seemed to be confused. Then the ground shook again, but this time differently. Not the deliberate movement of the armored horror, but something wilder. From the surrounding trees came crashing sounds as creatures of all kinds, birds, small mammals, even insects, descended upon the grove in a frenzied swarm. They ignored the primates completely, attacking only the vines, the pods, the seed pod itself. The young male realized with sudden clarity. The grove had made its first mistake. It had tried to change what it didn't understand. And now the entire forest was fighting back. The forest creatures attacked the grove with mindless fury, their teeth and claws tearing at vines that had stood undisturbed for generations. But the young male noticed something strange. Their eyes were clear. This wasn't control. This was hatred. Pure, instinctive rejection of something that didn't belong. The transformed primate staggered, the patterns in his eyes flickering wildly. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, as if trying to remember how to scream. Then, with sudden violence, he turned on the seed pod itself, his new claws raking across its pulsating surface. A sound like shattering glass split the air as the pod cracked open. What spilled out wasn't seeds or sap, but light, blinding white tendrils of energy that writhed in the air before dissolving into nothingness. Where they touched the ground, the earth itself recoiled, plants withering instantly only to regrow seconds later, changed. Their leaves had taken on the same metallic sheen as the transformed primate's fur. The armored horror let out a series of rapid clicks and retreated into its fissure for good. The watchers were already gone, vanished into the trees. Only the primates remained, caught between the dying grove and a forest that would never be the same. The transformed primate collapsed, his body convulsing. As the young male cautiously approached, the creature's eyes cleared for one brief moment, and in them was recognition. A final, desperate act of will. His clawed hand shoved something toward the young male before his body went still forever. A seed, not like the pods. Smaller, simpler, natural, and warm with possibility. The seed pulsed faintly in the young male's palm, its warmth spreading through his fingers like sunlight. Around him, the grove lay in ruins, vines shriveled, pods split open, their strange glow extinguished. The forest creatures had dispersed, leaving behind an eerie silence. Then, movement. The striped watchers emerged once more from the trees, but this time they carried something. Not weapons, not threats, bundles of leaves, cradled carefully in their clawed hands. They approached slowly, their strange eyes fixed not on the primates, but on the seed. One watcher stepped forward, unfolding its leaves to reveal a handful of dark, glistening berries, the same kind that had once grown in the grove before it changed, before it became something unnatural. The watcher placed them deliberately at the young male's feet, then pointed to the seed in his hand. A trait, a memory flashed in the young male's mind, his earliest days in the treetops, plucking fruit just like these. Safe, familiar, right. The grove had twisted that memory into something terrible, but the watchers were offering it back. The seed grew hotter in his palm, as if reacting to the berries. He could feel it, the choice before him. Plant the seed, and let something new grow, or crush it, and return to how things were. But as he hesitated, the ground trembled one final time, not from the armored horror, but from something deeper, something waking. The watchers froze. Their eyes widened in what could only be fear. The seed wasn't the end. It was an invitation. And whatever waited beneath the earth had just accepted. The trembling grew stronger, shaking loose stones from the fissures around them. The young male clutched the seed tighter, its heat now almost unbearable. The watchers had backed away, their striped furs standing on end as they stared at the ground with something like reverence or terror. Then the earth spoke, not in words, but in vibrations, deep, resonant pulses that traveled up through the primates' feet and into their bones. The sound carried images with it, flashing through their minds too fast to grasp. Towering shapes moving through ancient forests, mountains that walked, skies filled with creatures that blotted out the sun. The seed in the young male's hand flared bright, burning his palm, but he couldn't let go. It was showing him something. A truth. The grove hadn't been a predator. It had been a guardian. The armored horror emerged one final time, but it didn't attack. It moved to the largest fissure and began sealing it with some thick secretion from its body, working frantically. The watchers joined in, gathering fallen branches and stones to help. They weren't trying to trap anything inside. They were trying to keep something contained. The young male looked down at the seed again. Its surface had split slightly, revealing not a plant inside, but something smooth and hard, like a tooth, or a claw, or a tool not yet invented. The berries at his feet began rotting at impossible speed, their sweet scent turning acrid. Where their juices touched the ground, tiny tendrils of that same metallic vine sprouted, then just as quickly withered. A warning. A test failed. The choice was no longer his to make. The seed had already chosen. It remembered, and it was waking up. The cracked seed pulsed like a second heartbeat in the young male's palm, its rhythm syncing with the deep vibrations coming from below. The armored horror and watchers worked desperately to seal the fissures, but the ground continued to splinter, spiderweb cracks racing outward in all directions. Then, silence. The sudden stillness was more terrifying than the tremors. Even the insects stopped buzzing. The young male's group huddled together, their instincts screaming that something monumental was about to happen. The seed split fully open, revealing not a plant embryo, but a smooth, obsidian-like object covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift when stared at directly. As it rolled into the young male's palm, three things happened simultaneously. The transformed primate's corpse suddenly sat upright, its glowing eyes fixing on the seed with desperate recognition before crumbling to dust. The remaining metallic vines recoiled as if burned, retreating into their pods. The watchers froze mid-motion, then turned as one toward the young male and did something unprecedented. They bowed. The deepest fissure groaned open wider, exhaling air that smelled of ancient stone and something electric. From the darkness came a sound like grinding boulders and something else. Breathing. The young male understood now. The grove hadn't been harvesting primates. It had been testing them, searching for a species worthy to receive the seed, to become guardians in its place. And whatever slept below was waking to judge their worthiness. The breathing from the fissure grew louder, each exhale sending plumes of dust swirling into the air. The young male's fingers tightened around the obsidian seed as the ground beneath him vibrated with a deep, resonant frequency that made his teeth ache. Then, movement. Not from below, but from the seed itself. The carvings along its surface began to glow a faint blue, projecting shifting patterns onto the surrounding rocks. The watchers gasped, a sound the young male didn't know they could make, and fell to their knees, their foreheads pressed to the trembling earth. The armored horror stopped its frantic sealing and turned its many eyes toward the light. For the first time, it made a sound that wasn't a click or a hiss, but a mournful, echoing wail that seemed to shake the very trees. The projected patterns resolved into shapes, images of creatures the young male had never seen. Towering beasts with hides like stone, flying things with wingspans that blotted out the sun, and among them, small, furry figures that walked upright, but weren't quite primates. A history, a warning, a test. The breathing from below changed rhythm, matching the pulse of the seed's light. The young male suddenly understood this wasn't just about survival. It was about memory, about proving they could carry the weight of what came before without repeating its mistakes. Then the first true tendril emerged from the fissure, thicker than the vines, translucent and shimmering with inner light. It moved toward the young male with deliberate slowness, stopping just inches from his face. Waiting, the watchers held their breath. The choice had always been his. The glowing tendril hovered before the young male's face, its translucent surface rippling with liquid light. Behind him, his group huddled together, their fearful breaths loud in the unnatural silence. The watchers remained motionless, their striped fur standing on end. Even the armored horror had gone still, its many eyes reflecting the blue glow from the seed. The young male did something no primate had ever done before. He reached out. His fingers made contact. The world vanished. Suddenly, he was everywhere at once, standing in the present while simultaneously seeing flashes of a primordial jungle where creatures with too many limbs scuttled beneath mushroom caps the size of trees. A burning sky as mountains of living stone marched across continents. The first grove being planted by slender, six-fingered hands that weren't quite hands. The Watchers' ancestors being given their stripes as a mark of stewardship. The armored horrors being crafted from mud and starlight to guard what shouldn't be found. The images came faster, too fast, threatening to shatter his mind. But the seed in his other hand pulsed warmly, anchoring him to the present even as the past flooded through him. Then came the understanding. The grove wasn't just a test. It was a lesson, one that had been taught to countless species before his. Most failed. Some succeeded. None remembered for long. The tendril withdrew as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving the young male gasping on his knees. The obsidian seed in his hand had changed. Its carvings now included new markings. Tiny, precise shapes that looked like primates. His group. Him. The message was clear. They had passed. The glowing tendril retreated into the fissure, its light fading as the earth began to seal itself. The cracks in the ground closed with soft sighs, as if the planet itself was exhaling after holding its breath for millennia. The watchers rose from their kneeling positions, their strange eyes fixed on the young male, no longer with suspicion, but with something resembling hope. Then came the twist. The armored horror moved forward, its massive body blocking the last closing fissure. Instead of attacking, it did something unexpected. It bowed, lowering its segmented body until its many-eyed head touched the ground before the young male. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones. The obsidian seed in the young male's palm grew warm once more, then changed. The carvings shifted, rearranging into a new pattern, a map. Not of the forest, but of something beyond it. A place where the trees grew taller, the fruits sweeter, and the dangers different. The watchers chittered among themselves, then turned and vanished into the forest without a backward glance. Their duty was done. The horror lingered only a moment longer before following, leaving the primates alone with the seed and its silent message. The moral lesson: the strongest are not those who conquer, but those who adapt. The wisest are not those who take, but those who learn. And the future belongs not to the fiercest, but to those who remember. The young male looked at his group, then at the seed, then at the horizon where the map pointed. The choice was his. And so, with the weight of the past in his palm and the promise of the future ahead, he took the first step forward.